Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey there, I'm Johnny Mac, and on Saturdays this summer we're doing deep dives on single topics for reasons I explained at the end of yesterday's show. On Tuesday, Netflix releases a new Louis C.K. special called Ridiculous, filmed at the Beacon Theater. It is Louis C.K.'s first special with a major distributor since 2017. Check your calendar. 2017 is the exact year everything in Louis C.K.'s career stopped. And Ridiculous is Netflix specifically, deliberately picking the relationship back up 9 years later. This is not a comeback happening quietly at the margins. This is one of the largest entertainment companies on earth making a calculated decision to put their name back on Louis C.K. And the fact that they're doing that now tells you something has changed in relation to a question that in 2017 looked pretty settled. So let's go back and take a look at what actually happened. November 9th, 2017. The New York Times publishes a report naming 5 women who said that Louis C.K. had masturbated in front of them, asked to do it, or done so over the phone in incidents stretching back more than a decade. Several of the women connected to the comedy world. Reading from the article, skim a little bit, but in 2002, a Chicago comedy duo had their big break, a chance to perform at the U.S. Comedy Arts Festival in Aspen, Colorado. When Louis C.K. invited them to hang out in his hotel room for a nightcap after their late-night show, they did not think twice. Times writes, as soon as they sat down in his room, still wrapped in their winter jackets and hats, Louis C.K. asked if he could take out his penis, the women said. They thought it was a joke and laughed it off. Quote, and then he really did it. He proceeded to take off all his clothes, get completely naked, and started masturbating. Then there are other accounts. You can read this on the New York Times from November 9th, 2017. Fallout was immediate and total, or was it? His film, I Love You, Daddy, had its premiere canceled within hours, and the distributor pulled the release entirely. HBO scrubbed his past projects from their on-demand. FX ended its production relationship with him. Netflix, which reportedly had a deal in place for a second stand-up special, apparently canceled that outright. The next day, Louis C.K. released a statement, a transcript via CNN. I want to address the stories told to the New York Times by 5 women, he names the women, who felt able to name themselves and one who did not. These stories are true. At the time, I said to myself what I did was okay because I never showed a woman my penis without asking first, which is also true. But what I learned later in life, too late, is that when you have a power over another person, asking them to look at your penis isn't a question. It's a predicament for them. The power I had over these women is that they admired me, and I wielded that power irresponsibly. I have been remorseful for my actions, and I've tried to learn from them and run from them. Now I'm aware of the extent of the impact of my actions. I learned yesterday the extent to which I've left these women who admired me feeling badly about themselves and cautious around other men who would never have put them in that position. I also took advantage of the fact that I was widely admired in my and their community, which disabled them from sharing their story and brought hardship to them when they tried because people who look up to me didn't want to hear it. I didn't think I was doing any of that because my position allowed me to not think about it. The hardest regret to live with is what you've done to hurt someone else, and I can hardly wrap my head around the scope of hurt I brought on them. But what happens next is the part that splits people the most because the timeline is pretty fast. August 26th, 2018. It is 9 months and 17 days after the New York Times story. Louis C.K. walks on stage unannounced at the Comedy Cellar in New York and does 15 minutes. No advance notice, no big deal, just back on stage at the Comedy Cellar in New York City. The club's owner reportedly said afterward that C.K. surprised even him by showing up unannounced. In December 2011, Louis C.K. self-financed, wrote, directed, and edited a special called Live at the Beacon Theater. He didn't sell it to HBO or Comedy Central or Netflix or anybody. He put it out on his own website as a $5 download with no copy protection at all, meaning if you bought it, you could do whatever you wanted. It reportedly cost something like $250,000 to make. He broke even in 12 hours. Within 12 days, he had made $1 million, and he wrote at the time with genuine surprise that he'd never had that kind of money land on him all at once. The bet paid off. People didn't pirate it. They just bought it. And that's the part of the story that sits right alongside the cancellation. Louis C.K. returned to an audience relationship it already proven worked. More specials. Sincerely, Louis C.K. in 2020. Sorry in 2021. Louis C.K. at the Dolby and Back to the Garden in 2023. 4 full specials sold directly. No studio, no network. Sincerely, Louis C.K. won the Grammy for Best Comedy Album in 2022. The Recording Academy handed its top comedy hour to a special that nobody but Louis C.K. himself had greenlit, financed, or distributed during the exact period the rest of the industry had locked him out.
comedians have gone up against Louis. If you're a murderer, you go to jail and they let you off, 20 years later. And then you try to get a job as a busboy. And if the guy says, I'm not hiring that guy, he murdered, and you go, but he did his penance, and now you give him a job. That's the humane thing to do. And people go, well, what about the murdered person? And you go, well, of course, he got worse. The guy that lost his life, he's doing worse. But it doesn't mean you can't forgive, or it's impossible to forgive.
During the years when I worked on my show, and even in the nightclubs, a lot of the comedians, there was a lot of activity, let's call it, frivolity. Comedians and waitresses and everybody. Men and women, chase after each other, right? Right?
Yes.
Yes, they do. Now, I've never seen it done in a way that was, that I thought that's not right.
So you're
what that guy's doing.
So you're surprised with all this Me Too campaign and things that are coming out now?
No, I'm not surprised, but you asked me if I'd seen it.
Okay.
So I haven't.
One of them is also actually your friend or someone you worked with, Louis C.K.
Mm-hmm. That's terrible. These behaviors themselves don't even make sense sexually. It's like, I don't even understand why they would do that.
And is it something that would cause you not to listen to him anymore, not to listen to his material, think it's right that they took him off air?
He stopped working. The problem for him will be no one will ever look at him without thinking about that. And he knows that.
Now, one thing that got lost in all this, there was a time when CK was being compared to George Carlin. That doesn't happen much these days, but that was absolutely happening. Now, part of this traces back to something Louis C.K. himself said at an actual memorial event for George Carlin in 2010. He described being stuck for roughly 15 years performing essentially the same hour, recycling the same material because it worked, and because building new material from nothing is terrifying. And then he described watching George Carlin operate differently. Carlin would discard an entire hour of material after touring it and start over, year after year, refusing to coast on anything that had already proven itself. CK said adopting the same discipline was the actual turning point that took him from a journeyman comic with a tired act to the comedian who, within about 4 years of making that change, Comedy Central was naming one of the 100 greatest stand-ups of all time. Once people started watching the result, the comparisons followed naturally. GQ called him the undisputed king of comedy during his peak run in the early 2010s. I think that's fair. Rolling Stone placed him in their list of all-time greats, and the specific shorthand, quote, the heir to George Carlin, quote, shows up again and again in writings about him from that time period.
I was having a lot of hard time being a father, and I wanted to say it on stage. And one night I thought, okay, forget all the old jokes. I'm going to start again. And I thought of the first thing. I said, I can't have sex with my wife, because we have a baby. And our baby's an asshole. It's just what I was feeling, and I said it. And the audience went, whoa! And I thought, oh, I'm somewhere new now. And I said something like, I never used to get babies in the garbage, but now I understand it. And they did that. And I thought, I'd rather have that than the tepid laughter for my 15-year-old jokes. So I started going down this road, and he was always the beacon for me. And since then, I've done 3 comedy specials, and I've started down the same road. It's been a massive change for me. I feel every year I've got something to work for. I'm doing exactly what he taught me to do. And on stage, I feel a courage to say what I want to say because of this guy. And anyway, a few years ago, I was about to tape my second stand-up special, and he was taping the same night, in LA. He taped his last special on the same night that I taped one. And I remember feeling like, this is amazing that I do what this great man does, and that we do it in the same way.
Whether he fully earned the comparison is a separate question. That the comparison existed at all is pretty interesting. If you're telling the real story of 21st century stand-up comedy, CK has to be in it. He has to be in it for like a decade, from the Beacon Theater experiment through Louis, through specials like Oh My God and Live at the Comedy Store. He was operating at a level that critics, fellow comedians, and audiences all independently agreed was or near the very top of the form. And he was doing it while simultaneously rewriting how comedians could build a sustainable direct relationship with their own audience without needing a network's permission first. Those are two separate major contributions to the art form: the work itself and the business of comedy. And think of how that has changed. And here we are in June of 2026. After performing at the Hollywood Bowl for the Netflix Is a Joke Comedy Festival, we will get a special on June 30th. Louis C.K. is back. And how do you feel about that? And that is Daily Comedy News for today. Back tomorrow with a normal episode.